Okay. So, great. So, welcome to the February First Friday event. So we've got a lot of people registered today, and we've got a lot of people who haven't been to First Fridays before, which is great. So just in terms of the overall concept, it's very much about sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing experience for anyone and everyone involved in the franchise sector. And we are absolutely delighted today to have as our guest Melvin Lusty, who many of you will know from his time in the franchise sector, and Melvin's with us today to share his story and share his learning and his experiences of developing and growing franchises within the UK over the last 25 years.
25.
20, well, you know, Melvin, being kind, 25, 30.
105.
35. So over to you, Melvin. I'll just let people in as they continue to arrive.
Okay.
And over to you. The floor is yours.
Just for clarity, it's 45 years. Yeah, I'm 67 just. I started at 23.
Wow.
And I've been paying franchise fees for nearly all that longer as well. I'm told not to start. Oh shit, my Graham's appeared on the telly. Can you actually delete him as quick as you can? Get off the speaker. I've got to concentrate on what I'm doing. I don't need you checking what I'm saying, all right, and waving around and stuff.
All right, I've muted him. It's okay.
Thank God for that. And I'll try not to look. I need to put a bit of paper over the top. Like I said, I'm full of cold. I didn't say it's pretty obvious. I dodged out of the last meeting because I was full of cold. So forgive me. All I do is I think it enhances my backcountry accent. So apologies for all that lot. Talk you through my early years. Like I just said to Julie, I started at the age of 23 in franchising. But before that, I came from a fairly hard up black country background, really, where my father worked 7 days a week. If there'd have been 8 days, he'd have worked that. We had 4 jobs for all of the time he was alive. He died early at 58. So I think I got a lot of work ethic watching my father work and watching Dad die at the age of 58 and not having a great deal of money, where the 4 kids, we had to have a whip round to pay for his funeral. Just sort of explains that the guy worked his nuts off and ended up with nothing. I promised myself that wouldn't happen. However, that was going to manifest itself, I do not know. But from the age of 13, I was delivering newspapers. And at one stage, I was delivering 400 newspapers on a Sunday. So by the time I got to the age of 23, I was working as a land surveyor with Bovis Homes, delivering 400 newspapers on a Saturday. I think I had a couple of rounds in the week as well with the local post office delivering newspapers. And I also had a Saturday, Monday night, Friday night job collecting television rental for the British Relay. Some of you looking at the age of some of you on there may have realised who the British Relay was. That was in the days when you had piped television, so you could rent your television line. That was where my father worked for as long as I remember him alive, until he just retired. And then just after he made redundant, he didn't retire. I left school at 18. I struggled with school, even though they reckon I got a genius IQ. For those of you who know me, we'll debate that later on. But I ended up with 5 O levels at 5 attempts. And so I went to school in Smethwick. I actually talk about my school as being a fighting football school. Half of the schoolmates, half of the people attending the school were ethnic in some shape or form. So at one stage, I used to play as a goalkeeper for a West Indian football team. So I was the only white player in a West Indian football team, which was pretty interesting most Saturdays, especially in the change room and not on a pitch. I became a land surveyor with Bovis at 18. Bovis Homes, that was in Castle Bromwich. And I wanted to be an architect, but that meant a bit too much education, too much learning required, too many of those A-level things. And that's basically the reason that I left school. One Easter, I think it was, I got the yellow pages, as was, had a look through there and found a lot of companies, not that there were many, land surveying companies. I don't know where the land surveying came from. It was building related. So it was, I found a few companies there. I got a couple of interviews. I got two job offers, and I took one of the jobs, which ended me ultimately with Bovis. A couple of years with Bovis Homes. That was going through the recession, the building recession. They couldn't promote me as they thought that I should have been promoted, and I thought I needed promoting. So I left and moved to a small building firm in Birmingham called George Stubbins. And I think at 2021, 22, I was classed as a chief surveyor. I had a company car, I had a company pension, and I had a couple of 2 or 3 lads working for me. So that was basically it. I started off on the building sites, setting out houses and roads and sewers and all that sort of stuff. Nowhere near architects, but I used to bump into architects at work. That was probably as close as I ever got to architects. So I'm now 5 years having left school. I'm 23. My brother's gone off and bought a franchise. So this is my story about how I got into franchising by default, like a lot of people. Very rarely is it by design. My brother bought the franchise with Service Master. He was one of the first guys in the UK, and he bought the Wolverhampton area, just the one territory, and bought himself a little Suzuki van. And my brother Ed was never the hardest working guy I've ever met. He was one hell of a salesman. He could do a lot of talking, but the physical side of the job. Now, for those of you who don't know, Service Master at the time was a carpet cleaning business. So he was cleaning carpets out the back of a little Suzuki van. He'd probably been doing that about 6 months. And while driving off to see a girlfriend down in Wales, he put his Suzuki van with all his equipment in it into a ditch, wrote the van off, knackered a load of the equipment. And subsequently, he was unable to do the few jobs that he'd actually booked. So I had a company car, which was an Escort estate, full of land surveying equipment. So I would come home from work, unload the surveying equipment, put the carpet cleaning equipment in the boot, and go cleaning carpets with him and upholstery. We'd do that at weekends. My brother always had great ideas. At one stage, he was going to be a multi-millionaire and buy the story's a bit crazy, really, buy a Rolls Royce and buy my mum a Mini who couldn't drive, and he was going to put the Mini in the boot of the Rolls Royce and drive her around. So it's something that sticks with me. I can only presume one of us was sucking or smoking something at the time from when the story originated. On the back of that, he then walked away from the Service Master franchise and started to sell cash registers with a friend of his. He had a good old tills that they used to have in the shops. And on the back of walking away from the franchise, what he'd done to get into the business of the franchises, he borrowed from the bank, and he borrowed our father's redundancy money, which was like 1,800 quid at the time. So we're back in 1980. This is, so like I said, this is the 44, 45 years ago, ridiculous amount of time. I was working for a bit of an idiot, a boss. We've all recruited these people who were working for idiots as bosses, and then thought that they could do it themselves better. All right, I was one of those, really. So I took on all the debts and I walked away from my job. I took on all the debts, and at the time, if my memory serves, I think it was about £7,700. And I think £1,800 of that was my father's redundancy money. The main reason for me doing this was to actually pay Dad back his money. That was raising debt, to get away from the idiot of the boss and pay Dad back his money. At the time, during the early 80s, Saudi Arabia was a place that you could actually go and earn a lot of money. So I had a chance I turned down a job in Saudi, I turned down a job in Barbados, thinking I'm only 20, 22, 23. But in the background, I had, if the carpet cleaning business failed, I could go and work in Saudi, and I could go and earn 2-3 times as much as I ever could as a salary. So the risk was there. I was getting out of a job. I was trying to pay my dad back, and the risk wasn't massive because I'd go and work in Saudi for a couple of years and pay off all the debts that I'd acquired. The business my brother I took over from my brother, he had little to no sales really. There was nothing in there. He wasn't charging enough. Service Master were quite good about taking me on board. They didn't think I was qualified. I was too young. I was overfinanced, so they took me on anyway, as a lot of franchisors tend to do. Not looking at any of you guys. That you've confused me there by appearing on my screen, Joe. So my dad had this phrase of get off your fat arse and let's go and knock some doors. So every Saturday he would take me Saturday afternoon and we'd go door knocking, leaflet dropping, and he wouldn't stop. He wouldn't let me stop until we booked a day and a half worth of work. So that would be, I can't remember what the numbers were, but every Saturday we did it. We booked a day and a half's worth of work, and I think between us that would cover our overheads for me really. He must have done some maths on a fag packet or a brown envelope. So I increased my prices, went door knocking, and I had a guy who lived up the road from us who worked for the council, who was always threatening to get me some work with Sandwell Council. Well, the long and short of that one was I ended up getting a bit of a loose contract with Sandwell Council, doing all their fire and flood cleanup. So if someone torched a block of flats or torched a flat within a block of flats, you could get a lot of soot damage throughout. So I go in and clean that. If you have the sewage backup or water damage or a header tank go or frosted pipes, then I would go in and clean that. And if you like, that contract was probably a saviour for me. And it was that helped me then build my Service Master business to the point where I had my mum working for me. And I think one of the lessons that I learned fairly early on, I've got a little note here that says I was a bit of an idle git. So I employed somebody as quick as I could and sooner than I should have done really. So I didn't have enough work. I'm in my first year and I took an employee on. So Colin worked for me from the beginning. And again, quite a secret, is getting off the tools as quick as you can. And so whenever I'm talking to whatever size of business, I'm always talking to them about getting off the tools and start using your brain rather than your hands or whatever it is that you do. And the tools differ from whatever background you come from. My learning curve at Service Master was massive, and I don't know what brought it on really. But for my first ever conference, I went up to the top franchisee and I says, can you tell me how you built the franchise and why you're number one? And God love, he's an ex-SAS guy down in Swansea, Cardiff, South Wales, and a thoroughly nice guy, ex-officer in the forces. But again, he shared with me what he could. He then shared other people with me and said, you could learn from these. So all of this time, I didn't realise I'm learning about franchising and how to run a business. And that's always been key for me through everything that I've done without realising what I'm doing, is I'm learning to do a better job, learning to be a better me. My education is sort of non-stop all the time. To the point where I became the largest Service Master franchisee in the UK. By the time I've been going 9 years, I'd acquired 3 more territories. I think I acquired Stafford next. I was based in Wolverhampton, which by coincidentally 50% of the population was either ethnic or council house tenants. So it didn't give me a lot of high-end carpets to go cleaning for, looking for and cleaning. I took on Stafford, I took on Stoke and Newcastle, and I took on Utah. So my territory was 70 miles across. So I would get the girls in my office to start my day an hour away from home. And my first job would be an inspection for a carpet or doing something like that. And then I'd work my way backwards. One of the big things I've always learned as well is I'm always looking for my next job. And it's hard when you're talking to people when they're dealing with a customer and they don't sort of realised as far as I'm concerned, that customer's paid for and done, is now history. I need to make the most of seeing if I can retain that customer and can I get referrals from them as well. And so again, I'm always doing that on autopilot. When I'm talking to somebody, be it Apprentice Trust or small businesses or larger businesses, I'm always talking about where's your next job going to come from. In Wolverhampton, a little note I made here is I used to get through something like 2,000 business cards a year and 1,000 pens. So any and everybody would have some of my cards. They would know I existed, all the carpet reactors and everything. I don't know where I acquired these skills because Service Master weren't really strong in giving you this. So I think part of listening to other franchisees, speaking to other business people, and then just putting some of this stuff into practice and running around like an headless chicken was what helped me get to where I got to. By the time I'd sold up, I was turning over 250 grand with a 50 grand net profit. And that was back in 1990. So obviously that was some of the craziest money you could ever think of earning. I haven't got a clue. I can't remember what I was earning as a land surveyor. I don't know, what would that have been? 5, 6, 7,000 quid 10 years before that. Now, while I was doing the cleaning, I did a lot of work for a flooring contractor, Jerry Brooks from Brooks Flooring in Wolverhampton. Did a lot of work sort of Midlands and Northern. I rented a premises off him and he watched my business grow. I then went to him to rent a second industrial unit. And he approached me and said, "You looking at selling, Mel?" I said, "No, not really." And he had a couple of twin sons that were early 20s that were dragging the knuckles a little bit and he wanted something for them to do. So he offered to buy my business off me. Now, remember the number, 250 grand turnover, 50 grand profit. In principle, I agreed 100 grand off him, and we shook on it. My accountant then subsequently called me a load of polite accounting swear words, said that wasn't very clever. And so we subsequently agreed 140,000 quid for the business. So 9 years in, largest franchisee, I was charging more than anybody else in the country for cleaning carpets and upholstery, even more than the guy in Knightsbridge that had been doing it for 20 or 30 years. Remembering I was in Wolverhampton. I don't know where all of this stuff come from me. I don't know what gave me the go now to actually charge more than anybody else and to charge the price I did. But I don't know, that it came in he built, I don't know, something somewhere. I came away from that business with 140 grand. 140 grand went into the bank in Jersey, sounded great at the time. Interest rates were running, I think I was getting, I'm trying not to exaggerate, is my want. I think I was getting 15% interest rate on it in the bank. Those of us old enough remember inflation going through the roof and interest rates being absolutely stupid. So the theory was, I'm going to have 12 months off. Well, within 2 or 3 months, Sue could see, the wife, number 2 wife, could see that I was getting a bit bored at the time. So I picked the phone up and found a company called Rainbow International. Said, "Any jobs going?" They played it cool a little bit. I'm only saying that now because they suddenly realised who I was, and I was the #1 Service Master franchisee. Rainbow had been coming to the UK 3 years before that, and headline numbers, they paid £500,000 for the master license for the UK to the Dwyer Group. They'd lost 1.7 million in the 3 years that they've been running the business. Subsequently, when I bought the business, in the 7 months up to me buying it off them, they lost £700,000. So I think they were chucking a kitchen sink at it at the end. They eventually recruited me because I was Service Master's top franchise and they think I could offer something to the business. Within weeks, if not months, my boss was sort of saying, "Fancy buying this?" And it's like, well, how the hell does that work? I got 140 grand in the bank. I got to pay the taxman 40 grand capital gains. And they were losing money quicker than I could even think of making it. So, yeah, whatever. It was the way the first initial discussions went. Then the MD from Mansfield Brewery, who owned Rainbow, knocked on my door and said, "Do you want to buy this?" And I said, "Yeah, you're giving it away." All right. And he said, "Well, no, we ain't giving it away." I said, "If you know, do you think I'm going to buy the thing then?" So we had a bit of a discussion.
Oh.
They started talking silly monies. And so that was the end of that discussion. Well, he then subsequently knocked on my office again and said, "Did you really want to buy this?" I said, "Of course, I effing do, but if you're going to talk stupid, then how the hell can I have it? You know my finance, you know I've got 100 grand to play with, you know the burn rate for the business. How the hell is that going to happen?" I'll cut that long story short. Within 7 months of joining there, I paid £1 for the business. That was an interesting day where you lob a £1 coin across the room to somebody to acquire a business. With hindsight, what a wonderful decision. At the time, the stupidest thing I could have ever done. Realistically, honestly, that really was. I wouldn't make that decision again today, only with hindsight. At the time, stupid. I got 100 grand. I was prepared to lose everything. So I was young enough. I could still go and work in Saudi. I could earn some money somewhere. I knew how to sell. Where the hell the skills of that would come from, I don't know. I had 100 grand. I had to put a business plan together that could prove that I could run the business for 12 months. I don't know what that business plan and financial projections look like, but it was acceptable for them. They agreed the deal. They needed to get rid of Rainbow, the city. They were quoted on the London stock market. They needed to get rid of Rainbow, so they accepted my business plan and proposal. The city were happy, and the board of directors at Mansfield Brewery were happy that I got where, truthfully, I hadn't got enough money. Before acquiring the business, or during the process of acquiring the business, we had to strip a shed load of overheads out. So I think we got rid of a dozen staff. On the day that I joined as an employee, I joined with 2 franchise sales guys as well. So I think the knack was piling it high and selling them, and the churn rate was ridiculous. In the space of 3 years, stroke only 2 years of recruiting, they'd sold 45 franchises, and there was only like 20 still remaining, with a network accumulative turnover of 356,000, I think the number is. So it was in a bit of a state. For me, the reason I did it was I was always frustrated as a franchisee and only having a small area. This gave me a bloody big area. It's called the UK. So I could actually have as big a territory as I wanted. Stupid sort of thought, but no one was going to stop me growing. Service Master, I always thought, were restricting me a little bit. So I had all of these territories to sell. So fly out to Waco, Texas. All right, some of you may have heard of that city, that town, in the arse end of Dallas. Don Dwyer, God rest his soul, agreed. Again, I was way too young. They shouldn't have been doing. They needed somebody else to have a go, so they took a punt on me as well. What did I do once I took over Rainbow? I'd already got in amongst the franchisees and was telling them the truth rather than BS that they were getting from head office. Some of those franchisees who were turning over 10, 15, 20,000 quid with 20 and 30 and 40,000 pound in debt. I'm not making those numbers up. Those numbers are truly realistic. And I was basically saying to him, if you ain't going to get off your asses and start knocking doors and start running around like headless chickens and listen to what I'm saying, all right, your business is going to just get deeper and deeper in the mire. So get off your behinds and start doing. For those of you who know me, Mike, my delivery leaves a little bit to decide sometimes. So I could fall out with a franchisee at the drop of a hat. The only reason I was ever doing it was to get their attention more than anything, to actually see if they were actually listening and were prepared to do something about it. I just kicked into doing a whole heap of training. We stopped recruiting. I don't think I recruited for 12 months. The system that we were running, the support that was in place was just not good enough as far as I was concerned. They hadn't got a clue what they were doing. So 12 months out, and then I started to implement the stuff that I think Service Master should have implemented, like a central phone number for the insurance companies. Means nothing now, and it would be automatic. Service Master was refusing to do it because they were the only company doing it. But I trained and I trained and I trained those franchisees. I did as much training as I could. I brought an ex-franchisee across to me, Bob Spencer, who we'd sort of grown up with each other at Service Master. Very technical, so Bob run the technical side of the training. And we trained and trained. Now I've just let myself a little note here that says injunction. It's something we dance around on a regular basis, don't we, in franchising, or we hear about it. Service Master had a chance of injuncting me when I went to Rainbow. The arrogance of Service Master, basically they sort of said, don't worry, it's only Mel, what can he do? So they let me carry on. They did discuss with lawyers, I heard after the fact, but they basically said he ain't worth the effort. Probably 10, 15 years on, they were probably wishing that they had done, but that's just the way it goes. I got 12 months into running Rainbow. The 100 grand was running out. I got no more hours I could work. The franchisees were starting to find a little bit of work. The insurance companies were promising to send us a bit of work. Nothing was happening really. I take a phone call in my car from my accountant, Chris, on the way home one night. And he said, Mel, I think it's time to fold it. I says, why? I knew why. So I says, why is that then, Chris? He said, I think we're down to the last 5 or 10 grand. So I says, oh, okay. I said, can I use the 40 grand that's in the bank for pay? He says, no, Mel, you need to pay that. You don't want to start winding the tax man up. So I basically said, talk me through it, Chris. He says, you're going to look, the house is going, your car's going because that's rented anyway. You're guaranteed, personal guaranteed on photocopiers and other bits and pieces. It's going to look like a dog's mess. You're going to end up with zero, if not less than zero. I said, bollocks to it, forget my Chinese. For the sake of 5 or 10 grand, we might as well go for it. So I said, okay, over to you. Well, if my memory serves right, this was the middle of the winter. And within hours, days, weeks, we started to get insurance work. I think pipes started to burst, rivers started to flood, and we started to pick up insurance work. Fortunately, I'd spent ages training my franchisees, so we were ready for the work that came in from the insurance companies. And if you like, subsequently, it was that I then built my business on the back of, was the fire and flood work and the insurance work. I probably had 20 franchises. I think I mentioned earlier that we were working on. So then we started to recruit. I think I may have recruited a dozen one year. I can't, but I'm struggling with the timing. But I think I went national with the insurance companies and I had less than 40 franchisees. I think I had 1 or 2 in Scotland. I didn't have anybody in Cornwall and Devil. I had no one in Norwich and over on the East Coast there. But because I had the central phone number, I could manage the work. So the insurance companies were passing the work to us centrally. We would pass it out to the franchisees. And God love my franchisees, they travelled miles to do a little inspection. It might have been 12 quid. They would travel miles to do a fire and flood cleanup. So very quickly we went from out of necessity, putting more vans on the road. And so we became, rather than a man in a van business, the way Rainbow had set it up originally, and Mansfield Brewery did it in the UK, was ultimately we needed more men and more vans on the road. And so that was where we sort of spent all our time, and the training carried on with doing the technical training on the fire and fleet cleanup. But then we moved sideways over into doing more and more on managing people, taking on staff, recruiting. It's worthwhile noting at this point, as my business was growing now, my turnover, my network turnover, doubled year on year, as good as for 10 or 12 years. So when I'm telling my story, I talk about me running a business twice as big as the businesses I run the year before, with all the complications that come with that: more people, more staff, more overheads, more premises. And so that was what was happening all at the same time. So I am running. One of the big things I did, and I remember learning the lesson, but I can't remember where from, who from, how, was to actually employ good people. I've heard it all before, but I employed a lot of good people who were much older than me. but they came with the experience. I brought my bank manager in, who was fed up of being a bank manager. He made a huge difference with finance and organising the business and the secretarial side of the business. I brought in my next door neighbour, who was pretty Polly, national accounts manager, to help me run the national accounts. I brought another friend in from the village who was actually a franchise manager for Ford and Volvo in Derby. He came on and he ran the sales side of the business. So all of a sudden, my management room, which was basically me and Bob, the other carpet cleaning guy, started to fill up with his experience. Ultimately, I know I've got to make a lot of the decisions, but whenever we had a problem, I could put it to those folks and say, what would you do at Ford? What would Volvo do? What would the Midland Bank do? What would Pretty Polly do? And we'd put all this information together, chew it all up and come out with more better decisions than bad decisions, if you like. Bear with me, guys. The cold's holding up, the cough's staying away. My prattling's going on. Where do we go with this one? By this time, I think I'm turning over 30 million quid, 135, 137 franchisees. I don't know, 500 vans on the road, 600, 700, 800 employees. Remember where I've come from and to where I am. I was spending a lot of time with training. During this time, my business, I'd struggled a little bit managing people, as you can imagine. I was working a lot with the local tech. Can you remember the training enterprise councils? And I'd drain them of all the marketing budgets and grants that I could get out of them. And the guy come in, see me one day, and I was saying, life's a bitch, I'm struggling retaining staff. And he pulled this silver box out. And I said, what the hell's that? He says, the answer to all your problems. He's like, yeah, whatever. And it was investors in people. And the investors in people, for me, I'm going to bang on a little bit about investing in people, because wherever I've gone, wherever I spend any time in business, I try and insist that they install investors in people, because for me, it just gives you the framework for managing your people. All right, for training, developing, putting your business plan together, putting the business plan together with the people. So as your people are incorporated into your business, because we all know we can't do what we want to do and what we're trying to do without the folks around us. I've always got my rocks off watching people grow. I've never done what I've done for money. My buzz has always come out of watching people grow. To see franchisees now that are still in existence at Rainbow, worth millions, and to see people that I recruited as YTSs or wherever I recruited them now be company directors or running their own businesses, that's worth all the money that I've ever ended up with. So they're investors in people, and training people is more than. When I sold the business, I think we trained 250 days a year across the whole board. All right. Most franchisors I deal with don't do anywhere near enough franchising. Now let's get selfish. I was running a business bigger than I've ever run before. My experience was lacking. I could tap into the experience that I got around me. I was still having to be a leader. I was still having to be the front man for this business. I spent a shed load of money. I think 25 years ago, I spent 15,000 quid with the Institute of Directors doing all their courses, how to run finance for non-finance directors, leading companies in company director, business planning, marketing. I did all of those courses just so I could actually run a better business and have more control of the business. I think I've probably done the rainbow thing, which is mainly my big story. Someone knocked on my door. I was worried about competition from Europe coming after me. I'm running the largest franchise business, restoration business in the UK. Some multi-billion-pound companies are coming after me. I had a brown envelope land on my desk one day and said, do you want to sell your business? Long and short of that one is I sold the business. They gave me, at the time, I was turning network turnover of, I don't know, 35, 40 million, profits 1.7 million, and we agreed on 10 million cash. So I got my 10 million quick cash out of them. They promised me 8 weeks. Company I sold to are ISS. It's somewhat, you will know them by default. They acquired, the year they acquired me, 80 companies. The year before, I think they'd acquired 75. They were used to acquiring their businesses. So when they said 8 weeks, then I've got to believe it was going to be 8 weeks. So it was 12 months. and £500,000 in legal and accounting fees for me later, which is what it cost me. Now, on the night we were doing the deal, I haven't put a note in here, but it's just gone bong. They tried to knock me down by £1.5 million. All right, the night we did the deal, I'm at Pratty's office that's John Pratt to you guys, I'm on Prince and Curtis in Birmingham, and take me to a side room. Numbers aren't as they should be. BS. Tried to knock me down £1.5 million. So subsequently, I told him to shove it, and I walked away. All right, the money was on the table, and I went home. I was furious. I just wanted to rip the guy's head off. I wasn't a happy man. I was in floods of tears with anger because they'd messed me about in my business so much for 12 months. They phoned me the following morning. It says, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at home having my breakfast." "Why?" And they says, "You should be in town." I said, "Why?" They say, "Sorting this deal out." And I said, "What deal?" "You've reneged, it ain't happening." And they sort of said, my language is a bit raw at this time. Basically, I said, "Go away. All right, you've wasted a lot of my effort and time. It ain't happening. I'm going to get back to running my business." And they basically says, "Well, if we come back to you and he's still 10 million on the table, is it happening?" And I says, "Yeah." They come back and I said, "Get your fucking arse into Birmingham." So I says, "All right then." They'd never heard that before. One of the things I want to get across to you, when they looked at my business, they're always trying to make it worth less than it really is. And one of the things that I put in place was without realizing it, was a 2-tier structure. I had a board of these senior guys, and then I had up and coming managers. So when my old guys died and gals died, my replacements were in place. I hadn't realized I'd done that. They'd never seen it in any of the businesses I'd done before, especially businesses of my size that I'd acquired. Sold it, guys. I'm 45. That was in 2002. Just a little bit after that, I was approached by a couple of guys that I sat on the board with, Sean Derrick and Nick Steig, and we bought Chemex, another franchise business. We were conned horribly there. We paid £3.5 million for it. It was probably overvalued by £2.5 million. We tried to sue them because they bullshitted the numbers. They wound that company up. I'm abbreviating this. This was an horrendous time. Subsequently, I lost £1 million on Chemex. One of the lessons I want to put in here for guys is, if you think you're a successful businessman, I've bumped into very few people that have been multiply successful. I think you could be a bit naive and think, "I've made that one though, this can work." I've never worn that crown, but it felt a little bit like I deserved that crown. All right. The deal with this one was Nick and Sean were working in the business. I wouldn't. I'd help them finance it. They could work, build the business, earn lots of money. All right, because they were capable guys. Subsequently, that didn't work. Fortunately, one of the guys who helped us get past that has just joined earlier, Mike Graham. Mike and Omar took the business on and worked their nuts off for the best part of 10 years to try and make it successful. It was hard work. It was really hard work for us. Well, subsequently, we sold that business last year. I got 100 grand back, so I think that took me down to about 900 grand loss. During that time, I never really worked hard. Hard. I never worked within Chemex business, but what I did do is I worked with the Prince's Trust as a volunteer. I probably worked as a volunteer for 10, 12 years at the Prince's Trust, initially on the loans panel, always on the business side. So this was helping small business people get into business on their own with funded grants and loans from the Prince's Trust. And subsequently, that was a little bit like the Dragon's Den. We always used to wind them up about the Dragon's Den meeting. They'd write a business plan, come in and see us. And subsequently, we'd do that. I'm conscious of the time. Joe, we all right for the time? Okay. Then I became a mentor for these people. Once the Prince's Trust had loaned them the money, granted them the money, they would then be on their own. And the Prince's Trust then gave them a mentor to actually look after. Now, what's interesting is they wouldn't let me. I was quite close to the lady who run the Prince's Trust in Nottingham. She wouldn't let me be a mentor for quite a while because I was a bit abrupt and a bit sharp. I was used to talking to franchisees, and they did what you suggested. or they didn't, and they became ex-franchisees very, very quickly. That didn't work with these guys and girls who didn't have much, didn't have two fathers to rub together. Invariably came from very rough backgrounds. One of the first guy I looked after, Dave, had just come out of jail. He'd been in for GBH. Another one was an ex-hooker with three kids from 5 different fathers. And so to try and understand and working with these people, I couldn't. But they tapped into my business knowledge, so I became a regular presenter for them at meetings when they got a bunch of existing talk business, to talk marketing, to talk business planning, and I would stand up there and talk. And it was interesting when they'd introduce me, and they'd always have someone smart ass young lad. They'd do an introduction and they'd say, "What you driving now then, Mel?" All right, and for a while I had the Aston Martin DB9. And so you could see I'd drop that in there and they'd instantly lose their attention. I used to have to drag them back very quickly and remind them where I came from. So I go back to Smethwick, I go back to the door knocking, I go back to the school that I went to and just remind them that I actually knew exactly. So the empathy was always big for me while I was talking to these guys. So for me, I can talk to a business person that wants to start a business from scratch. And if you like, that's where I'm in my element. But I can always drop into most boardrooms as well, because most boards and most companies aren't run very, very strictly. There's a lot of people in those boardrooms that shouldn't be there. Some of you will have been in those boardrooms mixing with these people that they've got there almost by accident, by default. Julie asked me to sort of put down sort of lessons I've learned. I'll have touched on some of them. I probably wouldn't have sold up as soon as I could. I probably should have stayed around. My business went from 30-40 million turnover to 85 million turnover in the 2 years after I left. It was chucking about 5 million quid to the bottom line. All right, that was all on the back of the contracts that I put in place and the insurance work. I was happy with my lot. All right, so don't get me wrong. Lesson I will share with people is say you don't have to leave. Put a good team in place. If you own the business, you can stand back, keep further back and take the money and keep drawing from it. Reward that team that run it very well. And with hindsight, I would do that now. All right, I would still be running Rainbow now if I had the choice again, without contradicting myself. And I said I'd have made the same decision. I would always strongly recommend people, if you can, stay around. Don't presume you're going to be successful with every business you touch. I'm still not the biggest fan of partnerships. I hate partnerships. It does my head in. All right, I've lost more money in partnership than I have in any other business. I'm a dictator. I find dictating much easier than having partners. That doesn't mean I can't work with folks, all right, but I can. Really consider getting non-execs on your board. I've loved my time as non-execs on the board at Premier Sport and at Revive. And during my time, I've helped them put structure in place, make sure the planning was stronger, make sure the finances are stronger. And both of those businesses, I think, in my time, became stronger and more profitable in the time that I was there. I don't necessarily stay around if I'm not getting listened to. Figure out what retirement's going to look like. I've been retired 22 years now, and I still struggle figuring out what it's all about. A lot of people, I just work my nuts off building Rainbow, watching people grow. All of a sudden, that was like a now what, and I've still not really got over the now what. So figure out, for those of you, I'll look at a couple of you on the screen and just try and figure out what retirement's all about. All right, you don't have to sell up, don't sell up. Be involved, keep the grey matter going. And then the last bit that I'll finish with is one book, all right, is my Michael Gerber book, The E-Myth. I trained a whole of Rainbow. Once I met this guy, once I know it existed, it's worthwhile picking up and sharing with your franchisees and with everybody else. It's not one of these motivational books. It basically is, reading it, small business owners that are trying to build the business will fully understand what that business is all about. and why they find themselves in the predicament they now find themselves in. I'm out of here. I'm done. You reckon? Have we covered it, Joe?
Yeah, I think so. I think we've thank you so much, Melvin. It's just well, obviously some of us knew some of the story, but not as much in terms of the detail of the story. So really, really massively appreciate it. We've got 13 minutes, but we're happy to stay on after 1 o'clock if people want to. So we're into our Q&A section, which is questions from the floor, ask what you want. You know, all of our speakers are happy to give an honest answer. Melvin probably has much more than most anyway. So Simon, I believe you had your hand up. You've disappeared from my screen, but if you
sorry.
off.
Mel, thanks very much for that. It's a really inspiring story. What I'm interested to know is, what is your ethos? What was your mantra for your relationship with your franchisees? You know, because I think, well, I'd be interested to get to hear what your thoughts on that.
It's always easy for me. So I was an ex-franchisee. All right. So empathy's easy. It was always easy for me. I'm used to paying my fees. I'm used to getting perhaps support as it was before. And one of the sentences I've got here, Si, thanks for reminding me, was one of the things that I did for my business when I started Rainbow was putting stuff in place that I knew, I presumed, I thought service masters should put in place for me, but they didn't, or they refused. So for me, it's that empathy stuff, Si. You will have heard it all before as franchisors. You need to have empathy with your franchisees. That always came much easier for me. All right, I could always have that discussion at any level with any franchisee at any time, knowing that I'd come there. So I couldn't build a business without them. I made the decision it was going to be franchising. I was comfortable with that. I'm used to paying my fees. I was also used to justifying me collecting fees off franchisees. All right, it would always wind me up when somebody said to me, it's in your contract. All right, us old BFA guys and old franchisors hate that phrase when they started referring back to the contract. We always know it's gone a bit too far. So my ethos was like my life revolves around them. But I've chosen to build my business on franchising. All right, they're here for me. I'm not here for them. I'm always comfortable having that punch up. Don't ever think that I'm here for you. That's the wrong understanding. I've chosen franchising as my vehicle to get to the marketplace. All right, you do it my way, follow my system, help me improve the systems. You're responsible for that as well, and we'll get on swimmingly. My job is to help you run a business, build a business. Your job is to actually do that. Right, so I'm always comfortable. I'm worried about falling out with them, so I'm always a little bit different to most folks, having been there and done it.
Yeah, no, I get that. Wait, but what, you know, but you never thought of them as your business partners, did you?
Oh,
Right.
can give me a couple of weeks to think about it, Si. No, I couldn't. Like I said earlier on, did I start replying to you by saying I couldn't do this without them? So call them a business partner if you want to call them a business partner. We're in this together. I can't do what I want to do without them. They can't do it without them. But let's say we're starting to get into semantics now. In that regard, it's clear who the boss is. Define partners. We're all my employees' partners. Yeah, not really.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the whole stakeholder thing is really shifted. I mean, in the last 25 years that I've seen it. I mean, you know, I used to sit in BFA board meetings with people like yourself and Les and John Bussey, you know, all very, very similar characters, you know, would instill a lot of confidence in franchisees, but equally had, you know, iron fist and a velvet glove. And I think the relationship is changing a lot in franchising these days. You've got very powerful multi-unit franchisees. You've got Rainbow franchisees now that have bought out the brand. They are the franchisor.
The lunatics have took over the asylum.
Yeah. So, given that, could you see yourself making another fortune in franchising, or would that be too much of a shift for you?
Yeah, I'm not. personally, I'm not looking for, but yeah, I can't see a problem with it. So I think you're always going to get this when you're an old lag who hasn't been around for a while and not been involved in it during. And I'll always just sort of sit folks down and say, talk me through it. You know, when I come in and sit with any other franchisor, they'll say my business is different. And I invariably say, talk me through it. Talk me through what's different to your business. You know, tell me what's different. You have to go and get sales. You have to go and get employees. You have to make a profit. You have to do some marketing. All right. You have to manage your team. Talk me through what is different with your business.
Mm.
So I hear what you're saying. I'll try and understand what it is that you're saying. But I could probably quite easily be 50 miles away from where you think you're coming from. So the deal is still the deal. The franchise agreement is still the franchise agreement. You are still choosing to get to the market via franchisees. Now, your choice where you have to learn is to who you are. And if you're going to take franchisees on that are bigger financially than you are, expect a different discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
You better be up for it. One of the things that I didn't put in, I've got capital letters through here, is control. Like in all Lumpit, we've got to have control over our franchisees and our business. You've got to have that control. You lose control, then yeah, you're gonna have problems. And losing control can come from bigger boys and girls.
I think that's sadly missing in a lot of franchise networks now. You know, they think of their franchisees as friends, as partners, and you know,
You've got to discipline them. Who's going to discipline them? They can get and do what the hell they like. No, they can't.
Yeah.
They've got to follow the system. McDonald's, they still talk about the goose that lays the golden egg. You screw around there, you've bailed, and we still learn a lot from the McDonald's in all sorts of ways. But that one, it still sticks with me.
Yeah.
You know, it really does stick with me. We're all in this together, but we know what were the rules that we're playing by.
Yeah.
Correct. Cheers, Mel. Thank you.
Thanks, Si.
Michael, I think you're probably the person on the call who's actually worked with Melvin.
Yeah, I'm through the treatment. I'm doing okay now. But no, if there's one thing I'd just like to say to Mel, and I'd do it in a public forum, is exemplary leader, very, very astute guy. And I think from my point of view, one of the big differences just in that conversation with Simon there in the franchising industry is there's so much more management executive now, you know, rather than the entrepreneurial leader that Mel was and some of the guys that Simon mentioned. You know, we have changed templates in franchising, so it's an interesting one moving forward. But fantastic guy, really enjoyed working with him.
Thanks, Ryan.
Brilliant.
You're coming out with a red book.
Dinner's on you.
Nadine.
Okay.
Nadine.
Hiya.
Hi.
Melvin, so one of Melvin's employees, 21 years and still at Rainbow.
Amazing.
At what point did you pay your dad back? I'm intrigued to know. Can you remember?
What time did I pay my dad back?
Yeah.
First year.
Yeah.
First thing I did, yeah, paid him back. I carried on paying the loan payments to the bank. I took out another loan for another van that I needed to replace. And I think 10 months. I think the number I got in my head is 10 months. I paid him back, yeah. Wasn't long after he died. The way it goes.
Brilliant. Chris, have you got anything you'd like to ask Melvin? You're in not the same, but sort of semi-related kind of business.
You know, the cleaning industries are, you know, the expression is, you know, where there's muck, there's brass kind of thing. And I think that's true. I think one of the differences that I'm fascinated with is the national accounts. How important do you think that was in the Rainbow story, Melvin?
Did you hear me say that letter, that word that I've got in capital letters running through my presentation? Control.
Right.
It was really. I'm going to dance around picking the right word, really. So it gave me ultimate control over the franchisees,
Right.
More control than most franchisors could ever enjoy.
Yeah, that's what I imagine. I mean, what proportion of the business was national and what was local?
90%.
Really? Right.
So, yeah, tens of millions. Yeah, we were negotiating multi-million-pound contracts. Biggest contract I had at the time was with Aviva, which was about 12 million.
Right.
So my franchisees would do all the work came centrally. We invoiced centrally. Or the franchisees invoiced nationally. That the insurance companies paid us centrally.
Right.
So if the
As you
franchise,
say, control, but also you're right. You're growing your business through a bunch of motivated. Can't use the partner's word, but motivated, business operators.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable. So I'm comfortable. You guys feel comfortable with what it is that you're comfortable with. Just understand the legal relationship that you have. All right, like I say, it is a little bit semantic, all of this stuff. I'm long enough in the tooth and old enough now and grey enough in the beard to not piss about and not mess about now. All right, when I'm talking to folks, I really don't. Life's too short to actually start punching about a little bit. So I will tread over the edge very quickly. National accounts is one of the biggest things that I went across to Revive for, was to help them try and understand putting national accounts in place. It's a tricky thing to do. It's a really awkward thing to do. You know, you start having franchisees saying, I don't want to do a national account. All right. All of a sudden, for me, get your head around it. For me, that breached their territory agreement. So I could now send franchisees into their area. So the choice is yours. Refuse to do the work if you want to. Don't complain to me when you see rainbow vans all over your patch.
So similar model to the model that Dynarod have used, Melvin, I think, and I just saw on the LinkedIn today that Jim Zockel died last month, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so yes, but a similar model in terms of, and then they were bought out by whoever to give them a network to service their insurance. Basically, so great, lovely. Any final questions, Ken?
Yeah. Given what you were saying about when you started, Melvin, and looking at the way things are now, has franchising maybe become part of the establishment rather than being the rebel?
I don't think so, Ken. I think you still talk franchising with folks and I haven't got a clue. They look at you like you got three eyes. So I think the rail situation doesn't help, does it? So, you know, they tar the rest of us with the British Rail Network. So
Yeah, there are some people working really hard to make franchising
man. For me as a model, I love it. I'll get to my grave loving the model of franchising.
Yeah.
Folks, you know, people who want to have a bash on their own, who ain't quite got the gonads, or are honest enough with themselves to say, I don't mind paying somebody to give me a hand. And if I can short circuit that learning curve, which I've all got to go through, you know, rather than trying to learn off the bloke and the girl down the pub, you know, rather than learning from the people, I think my franchisees get it wrong, is they don't tap into the knowledge that's actually there. And vice versa, I don't think the franchisors make the most of the knowledge that they have in the network.
Yeah.
And they, you know, there's still franchisors around, you'll know them better than I do, that don't let the franchisees communicate. They don't have regional meetings, they don't have national conferences. That is absolutely bloody ludicrous. What a waste of the most valuable asset I think most franchisors have got. And to lob back a little bit, Ken, that's one of the things that, you know, we as franchisors, we can always share much easier than a normal type of business model, if you like. But we've got to facilitate it. You know, the franchisors really have got to facilitate that. You know, worried about your franchisees talking with each other, ask yourself the question why. And it's probably down to you as the franchisor why you're uncomfortable with them talking to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
You had a really good relationship with your master franchisor, though, didn't you? I think that was it. You haven't mentioned much about that, but I know your relationship with Dwyer was very strong, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was awkward for them because I ended up building Rainbow bigger than the Rainbow in the States.
Yeah.
They sensibly, you know, it runs on from that. That's a nice question to post. I would go over to the States for conferences and I would attend their advisory council meetings. All right, to actually share with what I was doing in the UK with their top franchisees, you know, and it would be embarrassing with the franchisor over there, with the Dwyers, having me spounce on and talk about the amount of work I was putting in. But God love them, they were big enough to actually sort of say, what can we learn from this fella? What can we learn that they're doing in the States?
Irony. I think they need to listen to that advice a lot more, particularly with some of the brands that are operating in the UK.
Sorry, I don't have a lot to do with franchising now, but I think I still know enough about it now, and to know the arrogance of the Americans that basically say it's only the UK. If we can do it in America, we can do it in the UK. And he does a very, I'm one of a handful of successful stories of master franchising. Master franchising, there's so many more failures than there is successes.
Yeah.
On the master side, when you were around it long enough to see how many were coming in, you know, and most of them fail. The norm. I bet you're up in there in the 90% of master licenses fail.
Yeah.
Some time frame.
100%. Yeah. But and also, I don't want to keep you for any longer, but they obviously, you know, they didn't create any barriers when you were looking to sell the business. Again, presumably they were just an interested party, but just let you get on with it.
So it's almost as if you've had my notes and you're touching on some of the bits that I didn't do. They could have stopped my sale.
Yeah.
ISS acquired me because they wanted to be the biggest restoration company in Europe. So they acquired the largest companies, which put them in direct conflict with the Dwyer Group. So I love the Dwyer Group, and Dina and Mike Bidwell, who sadly passed away 6 months ago. They spent a lot of time with me and ISS tweaking the sales agreement and slightly tweaking the master license to suit the environment. Now, with hindsight, everybody benefited like hell because ISS sent them so many more fees than they did than I did. So it all worked incredibly well, fortunately. So yeah, God love them. It was Dina's birthday, Dina Dwyer's this week, and mine a couple of days before. So we still communicated.
Did they give you a gold watch at one convention or something?
I had one of Don Dwyer's watches.
Yeah.
I had a Don Dwyer watch. Yeah, he was a collector of watches. So I've still got it upstairs. So it's a diamond studded. Yeah, it suits me so much. Diamond studded gold. He wasn't a big Rolex one, but it was a nice light. Comes out there once or twice every 5 years. It comes out.
Bless
Thank
you.
you. I'm just going to finish off the final session just to say again, massive big thank you to Melvin. And we have the event next month, which is scheduled for the 1st of March. We've just got a few guest speakers there to confirm on that. We'll be going again at the beginning of March with the next First Friday. So thank you.